Straight up, this is my favorite fight on this card. Matt, we talked about this before we even started filming this video. The perfect quote for this is Bellator's heavyweight, oh boy, Jake Hager. And to really get this quote right,
I'm rock hard right now with emotion. I got a phoner.
I'm rock hard with emotion for this fight, just figuratively speaking, but also Manscaped. Check it out. Overall, Nate Landwehr taking on Movsar Evloev. We're talking about a couple of former M1 global champions. For Evloev, the bantamweight champion. For Nate Landwehr, the featherweight champion. These guys both headlined, one on top of another. M1 Challenge 95, back when Craig Allan was watching every single M1 challenge there was. And that was a great one. Battle of the Mountains number 7. It was crazy because it was like in mountains, but in a valley, and then it's open air, and they use the Rage, you know, the ring cage hybrid that M1's so well known for. But overall, good performances by both men there. They kept their belts. But overall, in this fight in the UFC, Nate Landwehr is an absolute wild man. He's a good wrestler. He can brawl. He can get knocked out by Herbert Burns and then come back and have a great performance against a guy you know and love in Darren the Damage Elkins, and one of the greatest tattoos in all of MMA. Nate Landwehr really put it on Elkins in that fight, and really overall in his career has fought that way. I mean, just absolute wild man. For Movsar Evloev, he really fights to his strengths, and this is a guy that is a master of sport in Greco-Roman wrestling. And Matt, we don't often talk about Greco-Roman wrestlers in MMA, with a few exceptions. I mean, Marco Madsen, the Olympian, Movsar Evloev, there's not a whole lot of cases where it works and you can go back to that base all the time, because a lot of head and arm throws and a lot of upper body throws, they just don't tend to work all that well in MMA. You just don't see it all that often, especially men's MMA. For Movsar Evloev in his UFC tenure, 3 big wins over guys like Sungwoo Choi. He picked up a decision there. He also picked up a decision over Enrique Barzola, a really busy fighter. And then back in July, a win over Mike Grundy, a fellow wrestler, a fight that had already been booked a while before, so it was brewing. And that was a really fun fight to watch.
It was. And with Evloev, he's a really interesting grappler because he'll kind of give up the takedown to promote the scramble. And it's a really fun thing to watch, too. And with an opponent like Nate Landwehr, this is one of those fights where you don't really have to worry about long bouts of inactivity. Because Nate Landwehr, like if Spike Carlisle decided I'm going to use my craziness for craziness' sake in the cage, he would be Nate Landwehr. Nate Landwehr will walk forward with reckless abandon. And like you mentioned, it's not just like this is a new phase of his career. This has just been the story throughout. And I like what Nate Landwehr brings. He's a great litmus test for anybody, even though he's had kind of a short career in the UFC, because you know what you're going to get from him. And it's nice to see if Evolev is a guy who doesn't like getting hit, if he's a guy who has any cardio issues, Nate Landwehr is the type of opponent that is going to show all the holes in your game because he can just do a little bit of everything. If he's going for the takedown, we'll see how good is Evolev scrambles. How good are they really? Because Landwehr will be able to keep up with him. He's got a really high pace and he's great at using it. Nate Landwehr is kind of like my new Clay Guida. He's just a younger version of him. You know you're going to get a great fight from him no matter what. Yes, he got finished early by Herbert Burns, and that was just a wild way to get knocked out. But even up until that, what happened? He was crashing forward, kind of using that recklessness to his advantage. And with a fighter like Evloev, I always wonder, is all that chaos and confusion going to hurt him or is it going to help them? Because we do see really good technicians, and I would say Evloev is in the more of the technician boat of these two. Really good technicians either thrive under that pressure or they don't do well with it at all. So it will be really interesting to see. Now, with all that said, I think pretty much based on their skill sets, Evloev's better at everything. He has the more crisp stand-up. He has the more developed ground game. But again, all that chaos that Nate Landwehr brings into the fight can get rid of all that technique. And it will be interesting to see, okay, can Movsar Evloev sort of navigate through all of that chaos? If he is able to start landing clean shots early on, and if he's able to back up Nate Landwehr, he's going to have so much success throughout this fight. Landwehr has to be in your face to really implement his game plan. Whereas Evloev, he could be the one backing up. He can be the one going forward, being the aggressor. So I'm just really curious to see kind of how both guys react to each other. I know that's a very broad statement, but in this fight, it will be really interesting to see sort of the give and take between the pressure that these two guys.
And we talked about guys that these two have fought in the past. And for Movsar Evloev coming up on the regional scene, a lot of good names. I mean, Lee Morrison's a guy. He got knocked out by Aaron Pico and Bellator, but you might know him. And then another name from that M1 global scene, a guy who ended up becoming champ after Evloev left, the guy who has a fight coming up against Umar Nurmagomedov rebooked. Supposed to be on that Connor card. Sergey Morozov. So for Movsar Evloev, some decent wins. And again, we mentioned those 3 so far in the UFC. For Nate Landwehr, some good names too. I mean, Adam Townsend, who's in one of our thumbnails, one of the early interviews that we had on the YouTube version of Fight Night Picks. And Victor Kolesnik, he beat him twice over with M1. So overall, again, good pressure from Nate Landwehr. Kind of shoddy takedown defense, but again, he's a wild guy. He does have good wrestling. That's the weird thing. His takedown defense isn't great, but it's not a huge shot on his wrestling. It's good. His defense just isn't great.
And I think a lot of that does come from the pressure that he has. When you're always moving forward, you're forcing your opponent to react to you. And a lot of the times, if your back's up against the cage, you can go right, you can go left, you can go straight forward. And the best way to go straight forward is shoot that takedown. And that has been where Landwehr has sort of struggled. His over-aggression does get him hurt. And the Fabricio Verdum, Stipe Miocic is kind of this point to the highest level, but if you walk into a shot, it just makes that shot a lot harder. Now, of course, Fabricio Verdum just sprinted at Stipe with his hands down, and I doubt that's going to happen in this fight. But that forward momentum of Landwehr, I think, will get him caught as this fight goes on. If Evloev can sort of stick and move, Landwehr's just going to keep on getting more damage and more damage against him. And as this fight progresses, you know Evloev's cardio is going to be there throughout the whole 15 minutes. And with Landwehr, it is one of those cases with his output of, is he going to make himself tired because his output is so high? Now, in the Darren Elkins fight, Darren Elkins is going to play that game with you, and he will fight at the pace that you're comfortable with fighting. So Landwehr, although the pace of that fight was very high, he was able to, keep it throughout. With Evloev, you're going to be running into that wall a lot of times with your Landwehr, and the real question is how many times can he do that and just keep up the aggression? I think at a certain point, he is going to have to kind of pull back on the reins because Evloev is going to be the one landing clean shots.
And I mean, if Nate Landwehr is going to win, because we're going to talk about the stats coming up soon, Nate Landwehr has never won a fight by submission. I would expect if he's going to get a win here, it's going to be awfully tough to knock out Movsar Evloev. So maybe you try and submit him, but again, it's never happened so far in his career, in Landwehr's career. It should be a really good fight. So let's talk about those odds, Matt. Movsar Evloev opened a minus 350 favorite. He's now an average minus 558 on best fight odds. For Nate Landwehr, opened up a plus 285. He's now at a plus 400. I'm sure that there's people out there that are listening to this. You're going to take a shot on Nate Landwehr. Here's something to kind of add to it. So in the fight that Evloev had against Sungwoo Choi, here's the scores. 2 scores of 29-27, 129-26. You don't see that very often. Against Enrique Barzola, 2 scores of 29-28, 130-27. In the fight against Mike Grundy, 2 30-27s, 129-28. So he has lost rounds in the UFC, but he's also had 10-8 rounds too. So if you're Nate Landwehr, you're going to get a win here. You got to overcome those odds that are insane. They're absolutely insane.
You know a guy's good when the worst thing you can say about him is, well, he's lost rounds. Like, that's the type of fighter we're dealing with. Where the best thing we can say is, well, I mean, he could have lost like 2 minutes and 31 seconds of a 5-minute period. That's the most disparaging thing we can say against Movsar Evloev. Like, that's the level of athlete. And I do think that the odds they're more out of respect for what Evloev's ceiling could be than they are against what Nate Landwehr has done in the UFC to this point. Because I do think it is somewhat disrespectful to have a guy as a 5-1 underdog who is coming off a win off Darren Elkins, who, yes, he's a little bit older in his career, but Darren Elkins is still a really good win. And if you are able to have a Darren Elkins fight with Darren Elkins and beat him at that proves a lot. So it's really hard to pick Nate Landwehr, but that's only because of who his opponent is and how confident I am in Evloev moving forward.
Matt, if we have a look at the Tapology picks too, just final nail in the coffin. 514 total votes, 90% going Evloev, 79% picking him to win by decision. Now, again, we've seen big underdogs win here recently, so it's not totally, out of the woods that you pick Nate Landwehr. I think he's a great fighter. I love watching his fights. Again, M1 Challenge 95, you get the chance over on Fight TV. You can watch that one. You can watch them both fight on that card. He is a really fun fighter, and there's definitely opportunities here. If he can keep a good pace and keep good volume and really stifle everything that Evloev brings in, maybe Nate Landwehr gets a win. I just really like Movsar Evloev. I mean, I was really high on him going into the fight against Mike Grundy. I love that traditional Greco-Roman style that he has, but his striking is very good. It's very refined. He'll throw a lot of spinning stuff, as they say. So overall, I like Movsar Evloev, and I actually really like him a lot in this fight. So I'm looking forward to it, both going with Movsar Evloev, but a much more competitive fight than those odds suggest. And maybe Nate Landwehr comes out of here with a win. I don't know. It should be a good one. It should be a great card. We're really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
This is, of course, one of our Fight of the Night contenders between this and Benitez and James. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt. We get a great card coming up. I mean, hey, Jack Hermansson taking on a really tough out Marvin Vettori in the main event. And as we always say, Matt, Fight Night Picks, let's get into it.